Welcome to Andy Crawford Photography. Today we're going to talk about HDR imaging. HDR is a great way to capture subjects that have a large range of exposure. Lots of darks, lots of highlights. What you're looking for is to open up those shadows to where you get some detail without blowing out your highlights. At the same time, exposing your highlights well without, closing off those shadows and just essentially turning them black. And so HDR, or high dynamic range imaging, allows you to do that. Today's digital cameras do it extremely well, and so we're going to go through the process for producing those images. I'm going to use Lightroom and I'm going to use Photoshop. And so we're going to work on an image of Cafe du Monde in New Orleans, one that I captured earlier this spring. And I'm going to go ahead and turn to the computer, and then we'll talk more, and I'll walk you through the process to create that final image. See you in a second. Okay, I've got the image up in Lightroom ready to go. Let's talk real quickly about what an HDR image does. So let's look at the screen, and we can look at a really good example. Again, it's a photo out of New Orleans from the French Quarter, Cafe du Monde, which is a must when you go to New Orleans. You got to stop there and get the beignets. So anyway, I took this image. It was just about the time the sun started peeking, well, sunlight, not really the sun, sunlight started peeking over the horizon. And so the light is very, very low. You got a little bit of blue in the sky, but the light on the eatery is actually pretty poor, other than the string lights that they've got on the awning. So here we go. We've got this image. You can see that this isn't too bad, but you still can't see everything. Your shadows are a little bit low, and so what I did is I took several images at different exposures. I think this one I took 3 images. So what I wanted to do was make sure, again, that I had enough exposure for the shadows to bring out those tables and the buildings in the background just a little bit, but also make sure that the lights were not blown out and ugly. So I've got three different exposures here, and you'll see as I step through them that each of them is just a little bit different. Now, this one I've got 3 images of, 3 different exposures of this image. I have actually worked with as many as 5 or 6 images. It really depends on the situation. Again, it's dictated by the range between the highlights and the shadows, just how dark those shadows are, how bright that those highlights are. And so sometimes you do have to go with more frames so that you can pull everything together. So we've got our 3 images. What we're going to do in Lightroom is pretty simple. If I needed to, I would make some sort of global adjustments to each image, but I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. So I'm going to choose, select every one of those images, all 3 images. I'm going to come up to Photo, Edit In, and then I'm going to send it to Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. When I do that, when I click on that, Lightroom is going to do all the work at this point. It's going to open up Photoshop. It's going to send those 3 images to Photoshop, and then Photoshop will begin working on the images, analyzing each image, and then it's going to create a preview for me that I can choose from. So when it comes up, you're going to see that it's an awful looking image. we're not going to worry about that, and I'll show you why. It'll become apparent as we work on it. Okay, so Photoshop is finished. You can see this looks terrible, looks like it's way overexposed. Again, I'm not going to worry about this. The one thing I would say is you'd probably need to click on Remove Ghosts. That will prevent, you know, if the limbs of this tree up in this corner, you know, moved a little bit in the wind between those frames, it'll help alleviate some of that movement. It'll also keep the clouds from looking too feathery. Now, sometimes you may want that, but in this instance, I don't. Okay. So I've done that. I'm going to click OK. Now Photoshop is going to create the actual HDR image. It's going to merge all of those images together and pull in the highlights and the shadows and present me with a final Photoshop image. Again, it's going to look terrible. But we're not going to worry about that. Okay, so here we go. It looks pretty much like it did in that HDR preview. I'm going to save this image, and then what's going to happen now is it's going to save it actually into, save it and pull it into Lightroom for me. And there's the image. It looks terrible, but the advantage of HDR is that it doubles the amount of exposure adjustments that you can make. On a normal image, you have 5 stops to the highlights that you can make, 5 stops toward the dead black that you can make. With an HDR image, you now have 20 stops total, so you can go 10 stops below the dead on exposure, and then you can go 10 stops above the highlight. And so what I can do is I can actually adjust it all the way to go completely white. I can go completely black, and so you have enough room to play with it and really get that exposure nailed down before you make your you know, your other adjustments to your image. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to come in here and I'm going to bump up the exposure a little bit. At this point now I'm back into Lightroom, and I'm simply making my global adjustments, and then I'll go in and make a few little isolated adjustments with different radial and linear filters as I need to. Okay, so I'm going to go up 2 stops on the exposure, and then I'm going to try something a buddy of mine showed me. Go all the way to the left on highlights, all the way to the right on the shadows. Then you can hold down in the Mac, it's I believe the Option key. I've got a actual PC keyboard matched with my Mac, but I think it's the Option key. And then click on the white slider and it'll go all black, but when you pull it to the right, you're going to start seeing some little points of light where the highlights are. You want to pull it just until you start seeing those lights, and if you'll look at it, those lights are really well defined, really well exposed, and these words along the, you know, Cafe du Monde along the awning is perfect. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the black. Hold down the Alt or the Command, the Option key on the Mac, and then but you're going to pull it to the left again, just until you start seeing some shadows, what you're looking for, and it's, you're eyeballing it to your taste. Now, if you look at this image, just doing that without doing anything else, here's what we ended up with. I'm going to go back. This is the image as it came in from Photoshop, and with the adjustments that I made, just those few little adjustments, it's already looking just worlds different. Okay, now in Lightroom you also can pull up the clarity a little bit, which helps with the sharpening, but it's a little bit different than sharpening, but the effect is very, very similar. It helps give you a nice sharp look. I'm going to bring up the vibrance, not too much, You can see that the sky is really pretty blue, obviously still morning, and then this awning is very well exposed. But you can see into this porch at Cafe Du Monde, and you can see it's before the rush hour hits. Believe me, within about an hour, hour and a half of this photo, all of these chairs were full of people like me who love beignets and chicory coffee. Okay, so I do still want to bring out a little bit. So I'm going to try a couple of things. You've got some filters up here. This round one is a radial filter. I'll show you real quick. It just simply draws a circle, and you can work either inside the filter or outside the filter. We'll go over that a little bit. I'm going to delete that for now. You also have this one, and it's a good one. It's a linear filter, and so it produces a gradient. So I can, for instance, come in here. Look, undo that. I can come in here, grab this filter, move it down here. Now what I can do is I can say, okay, I need to add a little bit of light to these tables and to this whole center section. So I'm going to come in here. Let me find the bottom. I'm going to narrow it down. Well, if I'll quit doing that. Obviously, you can rotate it. Okay, now then. I've got it set on Dodge Lighten, which is going to add a little bit of light. And let me show you how powerful this tool is. I'm going to pull it way up, and you see how that works. It's a gradient that below it is increasing the exposure, but it's just softly. See how when I pull it up, it just fades into that upper portion. And so obviously I don't want that much, but look how easy it is just to add light, and I can extend that gradient so that it's a softer transition. But this image already is looking better. And so I'm actually going to pull a little bit out of it. I don't want too much. We'll put about 0.75. Okay? Hit enter and enter again. Now then, let's go back to the original image. This is what came in from Photoshop. That's where we're at right now. Okay. That looks pretty good to me. I have already marked it so I know which one it is. Let's compare it to the original edit that I did. It may be different, and I'll tell you why in a minute. This is what we've got right now with what we've done today. That is the finished image that I put together after I shot this back in February. Now, it's a pretty dramatic difference. Again, let's go back and forth. One, you'll see that I chose to get rid of these tree limbs up here. I think they're distracting, so I simply took those out. That can be done right here, although I did it in a different way, but you can remove those to some degree. This is spot remover. I use it sometimes when there's small spots, but something like this I would actually use either Photoshop, or I would take it into a third program called Perfect Photos, and that program is really how I finished this image off to be so dramatic. Obviously, I made different choices. I left the bottom fairly dark. You know, still a lot of detail in it, but the sky is a little darker. I also chose to really pump up the saturation and the detailing inside this area of the restaurant. So you can do a lot of things with with Lightroom, there are some limitations. That's the reason I've got Perfect Photo. I like Perfect Photo to increase vibrancy, maybe some clarity. It's got a really cool HDR tool that you can go in, and I use that with the original image, that you can go in and it will actually pull out some of the shadows, and it really gives a great effect. You got to be a little careful because it'll become very, very obvious what you've done. And I'll tell you, my approach is, whereas I use HDR, absolutely, I don't want it to be, in general, I don't want it to be too obvious what I did. Most people will know, but I don't want one of those images that just looks fake. I want it to look inviting, but realistic at the same time. So that's how you create an HDR image. At this point, all I would have to do is right-click on the thumbnail and go to export, and then I could export it out to wherever I want it. I could save it as a JPEG, and then I upload it to my my fine art gallery that I house on Fine Art America. So that's it. Another video, I'll tell you what, we'll shoot another video and we'll take it into Perfect Photo, and I'll show you what effects you can have within Perfect Photo that can really help take this image, which is really nice, up one more level and make it not nice but great. Make it a whole lot like this image. I appreciate you joining me. We'll talk to you next time. Please subscribe to this channel and visit me at www.andycrawford.photography, and there you'll find all the links to my work. You'll find information about my portrait work, and read blogs. You can also subscribe to my newsletter there, where I'll send out sort of regular updates and members only offers.